first YouTube video, Lincoln. How do you feel, baby? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is super weird and super new and super exciting because I have a guest star and he will probably be a guest star in most of my videos going forward. This is my baby, Lincoln. Hi, Lincoln. Say hi to everybody. He's in my little baby Caton right now. He loves this thing, by the way. So this is the first time I am attempting to film videos with baby. He is 5.5 weeks old now, and it's taken me this long to get into a routine and to feel like, okay, I can take some time to film some videos. So we're gonna try it today, starting out with my labor and delivery story. So if you guys are interested to hear about my labor and delivery story, then just keep watching this video. If you're new to my channel, if you're new to this video, if you randomly clicked on it, my name is Melissa. I typically make beauty and makeup videos, but when I got pregnant, I decided to start making baby videos. So I have a whole entire pregnancy playlist that I will link down below for you guys. And now I'm gonna start doing like Mommy Mondays. So this is my very first Mommy Monday video, but if you're interested in seeing more like pregnancy related videos, maybe you're pregnant, then I will link both playlists down below for you. Also, if you are a fan of my makeup videos, they are coming. I promise I'm gonna start filming makeup videos here very, very soon. I'm just waiting for a few more packages to arrive in the mail and then I'll start filming those again. Okay, so my due date was September 5th, which was a Thursday. And I was anxiously awaiting that date. I thought for sure I was gonna go into labor like incredibly early. My mom and sister both went into labor super duper early. So in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna go ahead, there's no way I'm gonna make it to September 5th, basically in my mind is what I thought. But sure enough, September rolled around, I was still pregnant and I was like, when is this baby gonna make his appearance into the world? I'm going to talk more about my 9 month of pregnancy. I'm going to film that video right after this, but it's going to go up, actually it's going to go up after this as well. I think, whatever. I'll link everything down below. But essentially in my ninth month of pregnancy, I established high blood pressure, which was not totally unexpected. I've had blood pressure issues in the past, like pre-pregnancy. Towards the 9th month of my pregnancy, it started to creep up and up and up and up. So my midwives basically had me on preeclampsia watch, and right around the 37th week of my pregnancy is when it kind of remained stably high. So I was kind of on bed rest, but not really on bed rest, essentially just watching my blood pressure, taking it easy, not doing anything to stress myself out. But my 38th week appointment checkup came and my midwife was like, you know what, by 38 weeks, actually by 37 weeks, they kind of consider it safe to deliver. But by 38 weeks, she was like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and put in the order to induce you. Your blood pressure is creeping up and I just don't wanna risk it. High blood pressure in pregnancy is very dangerous for the baby and mom. And so she went ahead and put in the order for my induction. Hey guys, so as I was filming my 9th month pregnancy update, I was talking about something that I figured I would insert in this video as well, just to clarify a little bit. So I wasn't induced strictly because of my high blood pressure. I also had high protein in my urine. So around between 27 and 28 weeks of pregnancy, I had my normal appointment with my OB, or well, it was at an OB appointment. I see midwives, not OBs, which I'm also going to make a video about because I think that's important to distinguish the difference between the two. Anyways, they took labs at that same appointment and my urine came back with really high protein in it. So preeclampsia, some signs of that are high protein in your urine plus high blood pressure. So those two things together are what caused me to be induced. They also ran a non-stress test, which is where they monitor the baby to see how he is doing. And at that point, he was happy and healthy. His heart rate was good. And because he wasn't in any distress, they decided it wasn't like an emergency induction. It was more like a, well, we should be safe rather than sorry, but this isn't like dire emergency. So that is why I was put on the list and not like sent in right away to like deliver at that moment. Now the way it works with my hospital that I delivered at is you don't just like walk right over and be induced unless it's an emergency, like medically necessary to happen at that moment. It's more of like you get put on a list and as soon as a room opens up, they call you. So in my mind, I was like, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that going in. I was like, oh, I'm going to be induced. That means I'm going to be induced. Like she said, you're going to be induced in your 39th week. So it was like 3 days later, I was gonna be 39 weeks. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a baby in 3 days. So 39 weeks rolled around and I didn't get the call from the hospital. And I was like, what is going on? So I called the hospital and I was like, hey, my midwife told me that at 39 weeks, I should expect a phone call from you guys to go ahead and come in and be induced. Like, I was all ready. I had my hair washed, like my nails done. I was like ready to go. And the nurse who answered the phone for me was like, oh, well, we have a list. It's really long right now. It's baby season. Like, our rooms are all full. We're super busy. So we just don't have a room for you right now. Let me check my list and I'll see like how far on the list you are to kind of give you an idea of when you're going to deliver. So I was like, oh, well, that's kind of disappointing. You know, you get all excited. I like washed my hair, you know, had my bags packed. Everybody, my mom was here. Matt was all excited. But I didn't, you know, anyways. So she was like, well, you're about like upper half of the list. So you should expect a call from us. What? So you should expect a call from us, you know, in the next day or two is what she said. Monday rolls around and that was Labor Day. So Monday was Labor Day and right around like 10 a.m. In fact, I have it all. Yeah, 10:15 a.m. I received a call from the hospital saying like, hey, we have a room ready for you. Are you ready to have a baby? Come on in. So when you're on the list, the waiting list to be induced, it's either like you spontaneously go into labor and then you go to the hospital, or you get the call to be induced. So it's kind of like this waiting game of like what's gonna happen first. So I was trying to like make my labor happen naturally. So I was getting ready to do the midwife's brew, which if you've heard of that before, it's like castor oil mixed with like orange juice and tea. Like it doesn't sound very good, and apparently in peanut butter is not very good. But I was getting ready to do that. I actually had sent Matt to Target to go buy a bottle of castor oil when I got the call. So he was at Target when I got the call and I was standing in the kitchen with my mom. I did the last minute things that I wanted to do before I went to the hospital. So I like washed my hair, I tidied up the house, I did the dishes, just everything. And it was kind of nice because I wasn't in labor, so I had the time, but I also couldn't take too much time because if another woman had walked into the hospital who was actually in labor, then they would give her my room, like they wouldn't save it for me. So it was kind of like this game of like, how long can I take / let's hurry up and get to the hospital. We headed to the hospital around actually I have it written down. Wow, I made really good notes. Noon is when we got to the hospital. Up until that point, I was 4 centimeters dilated. So I had been 4 centimeters dilated since I think she checked me at 38 weeks, maybe it was 37 weeks. So I had remained at 4 centimeters, and when I got to the hospital, I was still at 4 centimeters and I was 60% effaced. So dilated, if you're not aware, is how wide your cervix is opened. And effaced is how like thin your cervix is. And then I was -2, and the whole number thing, like -2, +2, like you could be up to -3 or +3. I didn't understand what that meant because nobody ever explained it to me and people don't really talk about it. But essentially that's like how far down in the birth canal the baby is sitting. So if you're -3, the baby is basically hasn't dropped at all. -2 is like slightly dropped. -1 farther down, 0, blah, blah, blah. And she said I had a tilted uterus, which throughout my whole pregnancy, no one had ever told me that. I didn't know. But apparently like he was just far back and it was really hard for him to get out. Or like be pushed down. So I don't know, if I hadn't been induced, I'm not sure that he would have ever dropped, or it would have taken him a while. I don't know. But anyways, I was at -2 at that point, and so they started the Pitocin drip at around 1 p.m. and I delivered at 2 a.m. the next morning. So my total labor and delivery process was 13 hours, which isn't bad, especially when you're being induced. But it's because I was already 4 centimeters dilated, like when the whole process started. So the Pitocin drips started and it wasn't bad at all. It took a few hours for me to even start feeling the cramps that the Pitocin was supposed to be like causing. So Pitocin is like it mimics the effect of oxytocin, which is the natural hormone in your body that stimulates labor. But yeah, it took, I mean, I guess it didn't take that long, but compared to other people, but it took a few hours for me to even start feeling crampy. So they kept coming into the room and they were like, hey, how do you feel? How are you feeling? Do you feel any cramps? And I was like, fine. And so they kept turning the Pitocin drip up and making it more intense and more intense. Hi, big yawn. And so it started, I mean, let me see. Did I make a note of when I started to actually feel crampy? No, I didn't. So it was a few hours. And then eventually I was like, oh, I kind of feel a little bit crampy now. And so they had me up and walking around, and I was like rocking in a rocking chair and like doing all these different maneuvers and moves and stuff like that to like kind of to make the process move along a little bit faster. And at around 6 p.m., my midwife came in again to check my cervix to see if I had been dilated anymore. So that was 5 hours after they started Pitocin, and at that point I was 5 centimeters dilated. So I had only progressed 1 centimeter. And while she was up there, so because my uterus was like posterior or whatever they call it, they had to reach really far up to check my cervix, and it was very, very painful. So while she was up there, she was like, hey, do you want me to go ahead and break your water while I'm here? Like, and at that point I was in so much pain. I was like, yes, just break my water, like get it over with, because I don't want to feel this pain anymore, because she had to reach in really, really far to check my cervix because it was so far back. So at that point, you are staring at me, little cutie bug, and you have grouch face. She broke my water, which was a really odd feeling, but they break your water to kind of speed things up. In a perfect world, your water would break on its own, but because I was being induced and because of the situation, it didn't. So she broke my water at 6 p.m. So after that is kind of when things started to really, really pick up, was after my water broke. So after my water broke, I have it written down here, lots of blood was like just coming out of me at that point. So I was laying on like a potty pad, like if you have dogs, puppies, like a puppy pad, they have them on the bed. And every single time I got up, it was just soaked in blood, which apparently is very normal, huh, Linky? So it was covered in blood, lots of peeing. So because I was on, ooh, what? You spit your passy out. I was on a Pitocin drip and just liquids in general. I was peeing a ton. So I kept getting up, going to the bathroom, kept getting up, going to the bathroom. Every time I got up, they had to replace the potty pad, and it was like a process. And I had to like pull the IV thing into the bathroom with me, and it was not fun to have to keep going to the bathroom, but I wrote that down because that stuck out in my mind. And then the intense cramping started. What's the matter, baby? I think he was just getting a little bit too overheated in the baby Catan. That's the hard part about being behind all these lights. So anyways, then the contractions really picked up, and I had planned on getting an epidural the whole time. I went in there like saying my only plan for my birth is to have an epidural. And so I wanted to wait as long as possible though, mostly because I really wanted to know what contractions felt like. So I just was holding it out long enough to know what contractions felt like, basically. And so I don't have it written down exactly when it happened, but essentially they started to get really, really bad, like to the point where you couldn't talk through them and it was really hard to stand. And they started happening every 3 minutes. And it was consistently every 3 or less minutes. And so at that point, I have it written down at 10 p.m., I asked for the epidural. So before they gave me the epidural, they checked again to see how far dilated I was. Now this time they didn't have to reach their hand back so far because Lincoln had dropped. So because they broke my water, that allowed him to drop farther down. So he was farther down in my birth canal, but I was still only 5 centimeters dilated. So it was a little bit like discouraging to feel like I have all these intense contractions, but I haven't dilated anymore. Like, what's going on? So at that point, they came in and they gave me the epidural. The epidural was something I was really scared of because I'm not a fan of needles, but it honestly wasn't that bad at all. It really wasn't. And the anesthesiologist who administered the epidural was really, really nice. And he kind of talked me through it. I mean, that's what they do all day long, is they just give epidurals. So he was a master at it, but essentially, if you're unfamiliar with what an epidural is or how it works, they put a little catheter in your spine and it numbs you from like the waist down, but you're not completely numb. Like, you can still move. I probably could have even stood up if I really wanted to test it. And you can still feel pressure. But essentially, like, they numb the area with like a local shot first, and that was really painful. But then after that, I didn't really feel much. And then they insert like a little teeny tiny catheter into your spinal fluid or your spinal cord or somewhere in your spine. They pull the needle out and all that remains in there is the catheter, and then they tape it on, and then that's it. So you feel like a shot of coldness at first, like a feeling of coldness kind of runs down. What's the matter, baby? Kind of runs down your back into your butt. But after that, like, that's pretty much all you feel. Okay, so after the epidural was administered, my blood pressure dropped dangerously low, which is not uncommon after you get an epidural. So they actually were getting ready to put me on medication. They had like a special medication they give you in that situation. They put it in your IV. But luckily my blood pressure started to kind of slowly go back up. And so that was kind of scary because they were like, oh, you know, your blood pressure. And then I had to like flip on my side, and like it was this big ordeal, but it went back up on its own. And then I have written down right here that I got the shakes. So the shivers and the shakes and a cold feeling down my back was pretty much what I felt until I delivered. So after the epidural, I got really super duper shaky. It was to the point where like you're like shaking your whole body. It's not like just like a shiver in your mouth, but like my whole body got shaky. And apparently that's not abnormal. And in fact, the anesthesiologist had told me, and the nurses had told me, like, don't fight it, just let yourself shiver. If you fight it, you're gonna make it worse. Just let yourself shiver. So I just let myself shiver, and it was crazy. I felt like I was like, it was just weird because you're just like sitting there like shivering, but you're not cold. Anyways, so that happened. And then they kind of had me flipping from side to side to kind of help me dilate a little bit faster. And then I got the poop feeling. So after you get an epidural, you cannot get up to go to the bathroom anymore. They don't let you stand up. Although I was saying you technically probably could, they don't let you stand up. You're kind of bedridden at that point. And I kept feeling like I had to poop. Now, I didn't think I had to actually poop because TMI, I had pooped like while I was in labor, but like prior to getting the epidural. So I didn't think I actually had to poop, but the feeling of having to poop was there. And my sister is a labor and delivery nurse, not here in Charlotte. She's the labor and delivery nurse in Phoenix, but she told me when you feel like you have to poop is when you have to push, because that means the baby is like right there chilling in your birth canal, like ready to come out. So I kept telling the nurse like, hey, I feel like I have to poop. I feel like I have to poop. And she was like, you're fine, you're fine. I was like, I feel like I have to poop. And that started happening probably an hour after I received the epidural, so around 11 p.m. And that's also the same time that the midwives switched shifts. Eventually, the second midwife came in and she was like, how are you feeling? I was like, I feel like I have to poop. Is what I kept saying. I was like, I feel like I have to poop. She was like, okay, well, you know, let me look at, baby's doing fine, heart rate's doing, like everybody's fine, like you're doing good. Let's check to see how dilated you are. So at 11:30 is when she checked me to see how dilated I was. And at that point I was 10 centimeters dilated, which is the like go time. And so at that point she like looked over at the nurse and she goes, she's probably been dilated at 10 for a while. I don't know how they can tell that, but she's like, it's been like, she's been dilated for like, she's been at 10 for a while. And I was like, I knew I was because I felt like I had to poop. Like, and so anyways, that is when the pushing started. So at 12:30, and the way that my midwives operate is once you're dilated at 10, they stay there in the room with you. Now, I don't know if it's like that with all midwives, but I know for sure when you have a doctor, they don't stay in the room the whole time. They will only come in like towards the very, very end, like right when you're about to push out the baby. And the nurses will stay back and help you with like practice pushes. But the way my midwives operate is once I was dilated at 10, she never left the room. So she stayed in the room with me. So I pushed for about an hour and 15 minutes, which is not uncommon for first time moms. My sister, the labor and delivery nurse, said that was way too long. I shouldn't have had to push for that long, but that's how long I pushed for. So I started with like practice pushes. And then it progressively turned into like, okay, you really need to start like pushing the baby out. So during that hour and 15 minutes ish, I started to get super nauseous to the point where like I thought I was gonna puke. So I had the shakes. I thought I was really nauseous. I thought I was gonna puke. and I kept like pushing the little button for the epidural to like administer more pain because it started to get really painful. Now, I say the word painful, but it was more like pressure. Like, I swear, I said I feel like I have to poop probably like 25 times every single hour. Like, because that is what it felt like to me, like intense, like, oh my God, like a giant, okay, TMI, you get it, right? So I got nauseous, I got really hot and sweaty. One thing I really wish I would have packed in my hospital bag is like a handheld fan. I know that sounds really bougie and really extra, but my husband was like fanning me with a paper, and like I wish I would have just had like a handheld fan. Or he had one to put on me, but really hot and sweaty. And then I have on here extreme shakes and shivers. So I started to get to the point where like I couldn't even hold still. I was so super shaky, so super shivery, and I had to push through every single contraction. So my contractions were coming once every 3 or less minutes. Towards the end, it was more like once every 30 seconds or a minute. So every single contraction is when I had to push. And eventually, you know, the baby comes out. It's the whole point of all of that. But I have on here that the baby's heart rate dropped right before delivery. So the last probably 3 or 4 pushes, probably when he was like crowning, his heart rate dropped really low. And when that happens, it's really dangerous. There's a number of different things that could be going on. But at that point, my midwife had actually called in a doctor, an OBGYN doctor from the same practice, and said like, hey, can you come in? And at this point, I was in so much pain, pressure-wise, that I wasn't even paying attention to what was going on. I didn't even realize his heart rate dropped. I didn't even realize the doctor came into the office, or the room. The nurse had put oxygen on my face because I wasn't like breathing well. I was kind of hyperventilating. I was like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. This hurts so bad. And so I didn't even realize all this was going on. My husband had to tell me this after the fact. Anyways, the last couple of pushes happened, and I pushed him out. His heart rate was fine. Luckily, nothing happened. They actually called in a baby doctor as well. And I do recall them doing this. They pushed the like call button on my bed and said, hey, can you send in a baby doctor? So I think they were just worried that something was going to happen because his heart rate had dropped so low. And I remember my midwife saying like, okay, we really need to push hard this time because your baby's heart rate is really low. We need to get him out. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, we need to do this. Like, I remember her saying that. Anyways, we pushed him out. 2:04 a.m. is when he was born, and then we had immediate skin to skin. So my hospital is a baby friendly hospital. It's like a whole, like it's a certification. You can Google it if you want to figure out what that means. But so they immediately like pulled him out, put him on my chest. They do delayed cord clamping, which was only delayed by a minute. So after that, Matt was able to cut his cord, and I don't remember any of this, by the way. I was just like, it's just like such a surreal, weird feeling. But anyways, Matt cut the cord, and then while we were doing skin to skin, my midwife had stitched me up. So I did tear, and it's so funny because that's one of the first things that went through my mind. Like after they placed him on me, after I was looking at him, I was like, oh my God, did I tear? And I thought for some reason that I didn't tear because I didn't feel it, but that's also because I had the epidural. And so she was down there like stitching me up for probably like 45 minutes. It was a long time she was down there stitching me up. But luckily she stitched me up while I still had the epidural, so that was good. And then everybody left the room, and it was just me and my husband. My mom left the room, and so it was just me and my husband and my baby for a while. And then probably like an hour and a half after skin to skin, a lactation consultant came in to help me breastfeed for the first time. And then about 2.5 hours after delivery, they rolled us into the postpartum room. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what happened. I have written down here that some of the items I wish I had packed, or like my essential labor and delivery items: chapstick, fan, wet wipes, deodorant, and socks. Those are the 5 things that I would recommend if you're packing your labor bag or your delivery labor and delivery, and postpartum is different. Those are like the 5 things that that are essential. The one thing I didn't have was the fan. I had everything else. I used the wet wipes a lot to like wipe my forehead, wipe my underarms, and then I would reapply deodorant, which sounds kind of dumb. So like I guess it's not essential for everybody, but it was for me. Socks, instead of slippers because before I got the epidural, I was in and out of my bed a lot. And you don't want to like wear your slippers in the bed, but you don't want to walk around on the floor without something on your feet. So socks instead of slippers. Luckily I had both, but I realized that the socks were just easier. And then chapstick because your mouth gets really dry, especially when you're breathing really heavily. Your lips just get really dry, your mouth gets really dry, you're drinking a lot of water. It's just good to have the chapstick nearby. So that is pretty much it. Overall, I would say that my labor process was not bad at all. Everyone is always so scared of labor and delivery. I know that's the question I got a lot from like coworkers, like, are you nervous about labor and delivery? And I wasn't. And luckily everything turned out really, really good. So other than my blood pressure dropping kind of drastically right after the epidural and then his heart rate dropping right before delivery, those were the two like big shockers or like scary-ish moments. But other than that, it was really smooth. Everything was fine other than feeling like I had to poop the whole time. It was good. And I don't know if I actually pooped or not. I didn't ask. I really don't care. Alright guys, well that is my labor and delivery story. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. This is probably really long. I feel like I've been talking for a really long time. But if you guys have any questions or anything like that, of course, leave it in the comment section down below. But I hope that you enjoyed watching and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.